Hey y'all, welcome back to the Don't Mom Alone podcast. I'm your host, Heather McFadden, and this is the place where I get to walk alongside you and connect you with people and resources so you know that you don't mom alone. And in this episode number 495, I'm welcoming back to the show Sharon McMahon.
And so the idea that our ancestors suffered greatly and chose not to grow weary in doing good. It was not based on some superhuman ability. They didn't have something that we don't have. They didn't have so much of what we do have today. But what they did have was a difference in perspective, that we must continue to do the next needed thing, that no work for liberty is lost, becomes part of the character of the country, and that we will continue our important work, even in the face of incredible adversity.
If you saw her name and you didn't know who she is, let me have the privilege of introducing you to America's government teacher. Back in 2020, Sharon started an Instagram account called Sharon Says So. It now has over 1 million followers, and there's a reason why. Sharon diligently provides those who follow her account with factual information, unbiased, on how government works and current events, and just giving it to you without what sometimes media will lean one way or another, and maybe you just want to know information and draw your own conclusions. Sharon is your gal. Since starting that Instagram account, and she came on the show in 2021, she now has a Substack called The Preamble. She has a podcast, and she has a new book called The Small and the Mighty. I wanted to have her back on the show, one, because we kind of have a big election coming up. And while we can sometimes feel anxious about that, or not know our part, or not know how to participate, I feel like her newest book, The Small and the Mighty, is a great reminder that our country isn't built on one leader. Our country is built by lots and lots of people doing their part where they are for all people. And I want to encourage moms that your role matters in the shaping of our nation. If you didn't know already, I just wanted our mentor Sharon to remind you. And I'm not the best at history or politics. I share a little of my story in this episode. So I always feel like an idiot that I'm going to ask the wrong questions. And I am so thankful that Sharon is gracious and kind and just answers so well what I bring to the table. Definitely follow her for real political information and insight. She also provides a great link if you are wanting more information on voting where you are, your local government. So definitely check that out in the show notes. But let's get right to it. Here we go. Sharon, you're back. It's been 3 years. I looked it up. You came August 9th, 2021. What a world.
Gosh. So much has changed in the last 3 years.
I feel like
things have changed. What's changed for you, Heather?
Oh, good grief. How much time do we have? This is not the Heather life update, but yeah, it's been a lot. And I'm just thinking about like even the questions I asked you then and what's pressing right now. And I was thinking you kind of have your thumb on the pulse of the political conversation. So my first question for you is, what are people asking you right now? Like what questions are you getting the most?
Yeah. I mean, like the biggest questions are like, will we be okay? That's honestly like one of the biggest questions. I think people are just feeling like a tremendous amount of anxiety over the approaching election. We are experiencing maybe a small amount of PTSD from 2020. Doesn't matter who you voted for. Nobody wants to repeat 2020. That was not fun. And I look at it a little bit like 2020 was like an emergency surgery. Like unexpected, like, like what's happening? Oh my gosh, so many unknowns. And the 2024 election seems a little bit more like a planned surgery in which we have a little bit more knowledge of like what to expect when we're recovering from surgery. But nevertheless, many people are really still dreading it. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Like people are just feeling like a tremendous amount of anxiety about what lies ahead.
Do you hear from people that this conundrum of like the lack of clarity on or are not really loving the choices, and so maybe just stepping away from wanting to vote at all, wanting to
Mm,
participate. Do
mm.
you hear that often, or are your governors all in and they're like, "Why would you not vote? This is a
Yeah.
privilege."
Yeah, I do think that perhaps the people in my community skew more towards politically engaged rather than away from politically engaged. But nevertheless, there are still people who are like, tell me why I should vote.
Yeah.
Convince me why I need to show up. And some of that is a function of the way the system works. It's not related necessarily to the candidates. It's related to the fact that we use in 48 states, we use winner take all in the electoral college. And so it seems like, especially unless you live in one of like the seven battleground states, the seven swing states, it seems like who will win in your state is kind of a foregone conclusion. If I live in California, but I'm a Republican, what does it matter? Or if I live in Texas, but I'm a Democrat, who cares? Like that's, I think there's a propensity amongst people to think that way, and it's an understandable way to think. Winner take all was not actually how the system was designed to work. It's not how the system worked for the first number of decades of the United States. And so and we're now sort of reaping the harvest of what we have sown. And a lot of people don't think what we planted tastes particularly delicious. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember after even 2020, you doing a lot of educating on the
Hmm.
Electoral College, and
Hmm.
it was news to me. I
Hmm.
I skew science, okay, Sharon?
Hmm. Hmm.
I grew up and I told you this, but this has been a long time ago. I grew up in a home of politics. My dad ran for governor, state senate, US Senate, Congress. That was my life, and I
Yeah.
ignored it completely. And
Hmm.
I have a little bit of a like PTSD about it. But I didn't know about electoral college. I didn't
Yeah.
know, like, why did we even should we do a little bit of educating? Why
Yeah,
did we
sure.
even make that choice as a country to not do
Mm.
winner takes all?
Yeah, what you're describing, Heather, is a little bit like when you eat a food and you get food poisoning from it, and you're like, "I will never eat meatballs again." You know what I mean? Or
Self-protective, yes.
yes, or you have, too much to drink in college, and you're like, "I will never look at peppermint schnapps the same way again." Like, just thinking about it, makes you feel, like, a little queasy. Maybe that's your upbringing where you
Mhm,
feel like,
mhm.
I can't do it. My dad ran for governor.
I
I
just
can't do
can't.
it. Mm-mm.
Yes, yeah, mhm.
We ended up with the Electoral College because they couldn't agree on another system. That's really the bottom line. Is that it was a last minute compromise. It was added at the end of the entire constitutional convention. It was the only system that was not outright rejected. It wasn't like, okay, guys, we've come up with the best possible idea. It was, this is the only thing that people, especially people from the slave states who had a very different idea of what proportional representation should look like, it was the only thing that they would not outright reject. So that was, sort of the genesis, is that it's added at the end as a compromise. And then one of the other things that they add into the Constitution is two ways to change the Constitution. They were the framers of the Constitution were absolutely rebels in their time. They were eschewing European monarchy, but they also were had a degree of humility to know that, like, we can't predict everything that will happen in the future. That's stupid
Mhm.
and a vanity to think that we can.
Yeah,
Like, we don't even have, even in 2024, we don't have the ability to predict what AI is going to do in the year 2030, right? Like, the idea that they could see 200 almost 250 years in the future is silly, and they knew it. So they wrote two different ways to change the Constitution into it. Like, hey, if you need to make any adjustments, here's a couple ways you might do it. And we have adjusted the Constitution, for lack of a better word, 27
yeah,
times. Right?
right,
So the
right.
idea that, like, it's not holy scripture. It's
Yeah,
not thus saith the Lord, and nothing,
right.
no word shall be added to or subtracted from. It's a document that dudes who wore wigs and owned other human beings wrote out with a
And had
goose feather.
whalebones. The
Yes,
whalebone
yes,
situation. Y'all
yes.
don't even have to read too far into Sharon's new book to
To
say,
get to the
"Wow,
whale bones. That's right.
wow, these
Yeah.
were our leaders."
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah. So they like gave a way to make changes, and we have.
Yeah, but winner take all in the Electoral College is not in the Constitution.
Ah,
States get to decide for themselves how they want to allocate their electoral votes. 2 states have decided to divvy them up, and the other 48 have not. But that system did not emerge until the early part of the 19th century.
okay.
So we're not using the system as it was intended. Even if we believe that the system as it was intended is perfect and immutable, we're not using the system as intended.
So what's your view? Like, do you think the system should be changed? Do you
Yes,
think,
of course.
okay.
Most people, the overwhelming majority of people agree with that. Like, they're like, this does not work. I am not being well represented. I'd like you to
Yeah.
find literally almost everyone you would survey. Are you being well represented in Congress right now? Almost everybody would say no. It
Yeah.
does do the presidential options adequately represent your viewpoints? Most people would say no. They would like to have more options. They would like to have more choices. They feel like, especially if you live in a state where there's a later primary, by the time that you get to vote in the primary, everyone else has dropped out. Like, how
Yeah.
is that fair? By virtue of the fact that
Yeah.
you live in Connecticut, you get no say in who the candidates are? That's not fair. They also
Yeah.
didn't use primaries when the system was founded.
That's a good point.
Presidential primaries did not become popular until after World War II. So that's
Huh.
another example of like how the system has changed. And I do think the system is meant to evolve as the United States grows and changes and evolves. But there's many ways. I mean, I could talk for the 2 hours about all of the ways that I think the system should be changed to better represent Americans.
And y'all can subscribe to Sharon's Substack,
That's right. The preamble.com. You
the
can read all about
preamble.
my options. Yes.
She will lay that out for you there.
Hmm.
I'm curious. It seems like everything has pumpkin added to it this time of year. Do you change up your makeup based on the season? Ever since I had my colors done, I don't. I choose the makeup that goes along with my skin tone and my hair color, but maybe you do. Maybe you like to add a little pumpkin spice to your makeup. Whatever it is, I am loving the Thrive Cosmetics makeup. You've seen the viral tubing mascara. You know I'm a big fan in that turquoise tube. It has thousands of 5-star reviews. And I'm even running into people at church that are like, thank you for mentioning Thrive Cosmetics mascara. I love it. What else I love about Thrive Cosmetics is how all their products are certified 100% vegan, cruelty-free, zero parabens, sulfates, phthalates. So they're clean, but they're also high performing. They have these trademarked formulas and uncompromising standards, so I know they're going to work, not just be clean. You know what I'm talking about? You get the clean product and it doesn't really hold up and last all day. I also love knowing that Thrive Cosmetics donates to 8 major causes, including those impacted by cancer, domestic abuse, veterans, and educational organizations. Now, some other products I love in addition to the mascara is their Brilliant Eye Brightener. I've been using it as an eyeshadow in the corner of my eyelids. I love the lighter shades for that. Maybe the Stella to the inner corner of my eye to kind of open my eyes and give me a little glow. Maybe you use a metallic shade all over your eyelid and you blend it in for a little smoky eye. Whatever you do, it's just super versatile and it lasts all day. Cynthia's a big fan of the Sheer Strength Hydrating Lip Tint. She's always asking me, do you have any more of that? I love that stuff. Whatever it is, spice up your fall look with Thrive Cosmetics, luxury beauty that gives back. Right now, you can get an exclusive 20% off your first order at thrivecosmetics.com/DMA. That's Thrive Cosmetics. Remember, it's spelled CAUSEMETICS.com/DMA for 20% off your first order. So a person's like, I've heard my husband is very, knowledgeable about this stuff. And he said, well, if my vote even mattered, have you
Hmm.
heard this?
Hmm.
If my
Oh,
vote
yeah.
even mattered, it goes right along with this. So give us the pep talk, given the fact that this is the system.
Hmm. What state do you live in again?
Texas.
Texas. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's very common for people in a deep red or deep blue state to feel like, yeah, well, good thing my vote will be erased in the presidential election because there's no point. It's a
Yeah.
very common way to feel, which again is one of the reasons I think we need to change the system. But of course, one of the most important things to remember is that the down ballot races impact your life so much. We think everything is about the president. And yes, the president is very important. But in terms of the things that actually impact, what kind of education do my kids get? Does the trash get picked up? Does Texas's electrical grid collapse when there's an ice storm? You know what I mean? Like
Real,
those
real.
kinds of things are handled at the state level. Also, there's a tremendous amount of democracy that is either upheld or thwarted at the state level because elections are run by states. Who is in charge of these elections? Who's in charge of making rules about elections? Those things really do matter. So the idea that like, well, the electoral college ruins my vote, I understand where you're coming from, but I would number one encourage you to strongly consider the impact of your down ballot races on democracy. But also, number two, the closer the election becomes in any given state, and you have noticed that Texas is that gap between red and blue in Texas has been shrinking over the last couple of elections. The closer that gap becomes, the more attention any given state will have from both parties. And that's
Mm,
actually a good thing. You
yeah.
don't, the swing states get all the attention from the candidates. They get the most federal money after the election.
Oh,
And so there are advantages to having a state in which the outcome of the election is not predetermined.
super interesting. And I totally think post COVID we get like the local government matters. I remember when this
Yeah.
guy was like, "Who the heck is Clay Jenkins? Why does he get
Yeah.
to decide that I don't get to go outside anymore? Like, what
Hmm.
the heck?
Hmm.
Who, you know?"
Your local officials matter. Yes. Your
Mhm.
state superintendent of education matters. Your state department of health matters. Like these have
Yes.
very real world implications on your life.
So where do you is there like one website or does every state have their own website to get the best non-biased policy information on these choices?
Mm. Well, okay. So who is running and like who's going to be on your ballot, what the ballot will have on it, that kind of stuff, that's absolutely maintained by your state secretary of state. So that's
Okay.
one thing. You can always go to your state secretary of state website. I also have a page on my website that has, if you just go to sharonmcmahon.com/vote, you
Okay.
could enter your zip code. It's completely free from political advertising. Your information will never be sold. It doesn't have any editorial information about, like, be sure to vote for Bob. It links directly to the candidates' websites. It shows you pictures of your ballot. So there's no like, and
Oh,
then
wow.
Sharon subtly told me to vote, only vote for Bob. No, you can just, it's going to show you who's on the ballot and then link you out directly to their website. So it's a tool that we built so that you could send it to a high school class that you want to have research something, so that you could send it to your friend who believes something different politically than you. And nobody is going to get to this page on the website and be like, well, I really felt like they were trying to tell me to vote for Bob, because there's none of that kind of messaging on it at all. So yes, you can get the information, some of the information from your state secretary of state, but I also have a voting tool on my website.
I love that. I'm gonna send it to my now 19-year-old who can
Yes.
vote for the first
That's
time in a
exciting.
big
Yes.
election. The only trick, and this is where I get my panties in a bunch, is, he's at college.
Yeah.
So we got the mail-in ballot request, and then we just got a thing in the mail that says there was an error.
Mm,
I'm like,
mm,
"What error?" I have a master's degree. My husband has a master's degree. How did we not fill out the form
mhm.
correctly? And then I'm thinking of like friends of mine who are newer to the country and who've worked really hard to become citizens and like English isn't their first language. And
Yeah.
I'm just saying sometimes all of the lingo can get so convoluted.
Yeah.
We're just trying to do our civil duty and
Yeah,
it's
totally.
hard.
You're like, it shouldn't take people with PhDs to fill out a mail-in ballot, right?
This
Like,
is what I'm
apparently
saying.
master's degree is not a high enough level of education.
No, I have, and it definitely not in speech language pathology. Apparently, I don't know enough political terms, but anyway, it was, yeah, that a little bit I got frustrated with, but I
Mhm.
will definitely check out this website. I have been truly enjoying I've been listening on Audible because I wanna hear your voice. I know
Mm,
it's Minnesotan, and there's
my
some
Minnesota
nasality.
voice. Yeah.
I love it. It
Mhm.
makes me think of home. I've been loving it, and I am curious, as you curated, researched, put together, beautifully wrote these stories of 12 unsung Americans, what did you gain personally? I mean, I know you were an
Mm,
expert in history already, but
mm,
seeing them back to back to back, even reading the audiobook as you're like rehearing,
mm.
what stood out to you?
Mm, that's a really interesting question. What did I gain personally? And I think there's a couple of sort of important takeaways that I have had. One of them is how our ancestors, and by ancestors, I don't just mean people you are personally blood related to, I'm talking about our forebears in the
Yeah.
United States, the people who, shaped the fabric of this country, how much they suffered and
Mm,
then how much they turned their suffering into purpose.
mm,
Almost all of them, with just a small handful of exceptions, suffered tremendously. And I think sometimes today, because we have advanced so much as humans, we have rid ourselves of a lot of human suffering. And I would say that in many ways, that actually is a wonderful thing. Guess what? We have anesthesia. Like weird. You can actually have surgery without being awake for it. That's incredible. You can have appropriate pain control after having said surgery. You break your leg. It's not like well, leave Heather to die in the field because she's going to slow us down kind of situation. You know what I mean?
and the
Um,
amount of tuberculosis, goodness
Yes.
gracious.
Yes, the number of people who died from smallpox and
Oh,
tuberculosis,
the
contagious illness.
smallpox.
Yes,
Yes.
that your children have a reasonable expectation of living to adulthood when they're born. Just
Yeah.
that in the last 80 years, that when you have a baby born, there's a very, very high chance that they'll live to be an adult. That's a huge advancement in the face of human suffering. So I would argue that we've done a lot to improve the human condition in the last several hundred years. But nevertheless, suffering is part of humanity, right? If it's not suffering from an infected tooth, then it's perhaps an emotional suffering, a psychic suffering of some kind. And all humans likely suffer at some point from something. And I think in part because our viewpoint on what suffering is has changed. It used to be viewed as like, that is literally just a part of life. Half of your children will die before age 5. That's just how it is. And it doesn't mean they love their children less. It doesn't mean that they didn't feel sad when they died. It just their view on what it meant is different. And so I think in many ways we view suffering as unnecessary, traumatic, damaging pain.
Mm,
And that's not to say that it can't be traumatic or damaging or unnecessary, but so much of our human experience is based on how we view it, right? It's based on what meaning we make of it. And I think we have a propensity today to turn away from making meaning of our suffering and to instead rail against the person who we believe is perpetrating our suffering or to rail against the concept of suffering itself instead of doing something meaningful with it. And
yeah.
again, this is no judgment. This is no coming from a high horse. I'm just observing how things may have been different in the past versus today. So that's one thing that I've noticed that I've gained personally is perhaps a different experience on suffering. And then one other thing is how our ancestors, our forebears, those who made a significant difference in the course of history, refused to grow weary in doing good. And it seems like today, our first inclination, our knee jerk is, well, that didn't work. Never mind. Right? It's a little bit
Or
like,
2 people critique it. 2 people critique
yes,
it online, and
yes,
it's like, "Never mind."
forget it.
Yeah.
It's not
Or
worth
3
the
other people
suffering.
are doing it. 3 other people are
Yes,
doing it. That can be
yes.
intimidating, right? Like, "Oh, there's already
There's
governors
already a
and"
podcaster.
yeah. Oh, there
Why
should be
should I
1
start a
podcaster.
podcast? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's already somebody doing that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so the idea that our ancestors suffered greatly and chose not to grow weary in doing good. It was not based on some superhuman ability. They didn't have something that we don't have. They were not better educated. They were not healthier. They didn't live longer statistically. Like they didn't have so much of what we do have today. But what they did have was a difference in perspective that we must continue to do the next needed thing, that no work for liberty is lost, becomes part of the character of the country, and that we will continue our important work even in the face of incredible adversity. Those are just lessons that I personally need.
Yeah.
I don't know about the rest of y'all listening, but I personally need those lessons. I need to be reminded of them frequently. My brain can easily run away with itself, and I need to keep coming back to those lessons.
With lots of teenage boys, you can imagine the messes, okay? You can imagine the messes. I've made jokes that it's like living in the frat house. And while we are training our boys to do their part, to take care of things, and my husband is incredibly clean, he is our dishes doer and our laundry guy, it's really nice to have products that help me clean well that I know aren't going to be toxic to our family. Y'all know I'm trying my best to purchase clean products. And hey, I'll say it here. Once a month, I do have wonderful ladies that come and help me clean. And it's nice to know that I'm providing them with products that are not going to be toxic to their health or to our family. And those products that I found that I'm obsessed with are Branch Basics. They're all natural, plant-based, non-toxic cleaning products that are super effective. They're even safe for our pets. You can wash your fruits and vegetables with them, okay? And what's even better is I don't have to have 47 different bottles of all the things underneath my sink. They have a super concentrated formula that works for dishes, laundry, countertops, your bathroom, whatever you're cleaning. They have a different formula of how you mix water and the concentrate. And so it's right there on the bottle telling you for this spray bottle, you add this much concentrate and this much water. And then when I need to get more, when we run out, all I have to do is buy the concentrate. So easy. I've also been using their oxygen boost in our laundry because boys, stinky. The socks, the sportswear, so stinky. And I have been loving Branch Basics oxygen boost. If you have suffered from eczema or allergies or asthma, you should make the switch to Branch Basics. You no longer have to wear a hazmat suit while you're cleaning, and for a limited time only, you can head to branchbasics.com/DMA. Use that code DMA for 15% off your entire order. That's 15% off your order at branchbasics.com/DMA with promo code DMA. Choose Branch Basics because cleanliness matters. This message is sponsored by Greenlight. As your kids get older, some things about parenting do get easier, like being able to pick up after themselves and being able to reason with them. They even will spend more time away from you. And so we've found that a great tool to help us teach our kids about money, how to manage money, how to be in charge of money is through Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and a money app made just for families. What we love is that we can send money to our kids and then keep an eye on where they're spending and where they're saving. And we can help our kids, our teens, build money confidence and lifelong financial literacy skills. It has been really interesting. One of my boys is moving into the stage where he's a little more interested in girls, and he wanted to go to a movie with a girl. And I said, all right, well, how are you going to pay for that? And he was like, wait, what? I have to pay for it? Oh, yeah. That's why dating, it's like, you need money. You got to have a job. And even his process of purchasing the movie tickets, using his Greenlight card, figuring out how that all works. It's all part of the journey of growing adults. And I'm so thankful that with the Greenlight app and the debit card, it helps us teach kids like, oh, if you want to have enough money to go to the movie, you've got to probably save up your allowance, because through the Greenlight app, we're able to add a chores feature or a one-time payment or ongoing allowance that is so helpful for them to see, oh, if I put some of this away and save, I will have the ability to do the things I want to do. Super helpful. Millions of parents and kids are learning about money on Greenlight. It's easy and a convenient way for parents to raise financially smart kids and families to really navigate life together. So sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/DMA. That's greenlight.com/DMA to try Greenlight today. Greenlight.com/DMA. To me, it's an encouragement. I know this show is for moms. I wrote a book called Right Where You Belong, which is on occupying your God-given space, trying to encourage people that we have various assignments. And if we would spend less attention comparing, contrasting, and trying to do the big thing that gets attention and just focus in on kind of stewarding where we are, bloom where you're planted.
Mhm.
It's not a new message, but it's what example after example, like you said, Clara Brown. I mean, oh my words.
Mhm. Mhm.
She was robbed of the chance of mothering her own children, and she mothered these men who
Mhm.
were settling in the West. I mean, oh my stars. Angel of the
Mhm.
Rockies is right.
Mhm.
I loved that kind of maternalness
Mhm.
of a lot of, at least at the beginning of the book, characters
Mm.
who use their gifts and those experiences of suffering or just necessity, whatever skills they gained out of necessity, and they served and they held up high regard for certain values that they wanted to see.
Mm.
And I love that it's the unsung. You wouldn't know. You would never
No.
have heard of their names.
No.
And that's okay.
No. I know,
Like,
I know. I say
that's
this in the
fantastic.
yes, I say this in the book too, that Clara Brown, there's a historian who has done some work on her, although she's never had, like a proper adult, nonfiction book written about her, in part because she was an illiterate woman and it's difficult to piece together her original, thoughts and feelings when she couldn't write them down. And so much of the historic record comes from conversations of people who knew her, who are recounting their own conversations with her. But one of the things that I think is really remarkable about her is that, when she is freed from enslavement and eventually becomes a pioneer of the state of Colorado, and she becomes wealthy. And I'm not giving away the
Yeah.
book by telling you a few of
Not
these details.
spoilers.
Yeah, it's not a spoiler, but she becomes wealthy through the fruit of her own labor. She does not become wealthy based on chance or like winning some lottery or whatever. And one of the things that she chooses to do with her money, I think, is so remarkable. And that is that she decides to invest in the infrastructure of the town that she lived in. And I don't mean like sewers and, fiber optic cables. The infrastructure of that time period was things like schools and churches. That was what held a community together. That was what helped create community that was cohesive, that could work together to get things done. And so Clara began giving her literally hard earned money. We like to say hard earned money, but this was hard earned money.
Yeah. When you all read those chapters, you'll be like, oh,
You'll
yeah.
see
I,
exactly how she
yeah.
earned it.
All of
Uh,
my electronics around here do all the hard work, is
yes,
what.
her actual hard earned money. She
Yeah.
began helping to found other churches to which she would never belong, because she knew that the freedom to worship in the way that you believed was appropriate was foundational to what a country and a community should be. And there is still a church that is standing in Central City, Colorado, that you can look up. It's a beautiful stone church, and inside it's on the historic record or on the historic register. And on the inside, the ceiling and the walls and even the pipes of the pipe organ are all beautifully painted in this, like 19th century painting style. And it was a Methodist church that Clara gave half of the money to build. And it took years to build this church. These things did not get, popped up overnight like it seems like some buildings can today. It took years to make this church out of stone, to have the pipes from the pipe organ brought in, The entire interior hand painted. She gave half the money to build this church, and it was a church that she did not even go to or intend to go to. But she felt that it was important for the community to have these things. So she, throughout her lifetime, gave money to the Catholic Church in town, Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, because it was more important to her that others have the freedom that she was denied for the majority of her life than for her to try to force people to think the way that she did. And that to me is just like, who gives money to a church they don't go to? Okay, first of all, that's nobody does that. If you give money to a church, it's
Wow.
because you go there. That's just like the
It's
modern
it's a
mindset.
little bit like a kickback, like
Yeah,
it comes back to
yeah,
you.
yeah. I'm going to
Comes back to
benefit.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just love that idea that many of our forebears worked for freedom, justice, peace, goodness on behalf of others who were not like them.
Yeah.
And that is not something that only one political persuasion should be aligned with. That are the great Americans of the past and great Americans of today work for those values, and ascribe to those virtues, regardless of whether they have an R or a D or an I behind their name.
Oh, my stars. I want to talk to you forever, and I can't because we have short time. But y'all, not only does Sharon have a Substack, she has a podcast. Here's where it gets interesting. And y'all can
Mhm.
check her out there, and definitely check out The Small and the Mighty. Just a little New York Times bestseller.
Just a
No
little
big
bit.
deal.
Mhm.
No big deal. Congrats on that. And
Thank you.
thank you so much for joining me today. One last word for the mom out there listening on her role in the shaping of our nation and her small and mightiness.
Every person, I firmly believe, is given important work to do. And that important work can change throughout the course of your life. When you have a newborn baby at home, your important work is taking care of yourself and taking care of that baby, right? And as your life changes, your important work will change as well. And that's not only acceptable, that's a good thing. That your capacity today will grow and increase. You will become stronger. You will have different opportunities. You'll meet new people. So do not grow weary in doing good. Even if all it seems is like I'm taking care of this baby, it does not sleep. It's a season, and your seasons will of life will change. So take care of yourself, and don't fear that this is what the rest of your life looks like. It will things will change, and in some ways they'll get better.
And look at our mentor here, Sharon. Just all that has grown in such a short period of time, and I just love that you have narrowed in on your giftings and your experiences, and you're using them right where you are. And so, thank you for joining us today
Thank
and
you.
all of your amazing words in this book.
Thanks, Heather. I
So
appreciate
so
that.
proud of you. Like a
Thank
proud
you.
little mom, I'm proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. I do hope you check out her book, that it is an encouragement to you where you are. To me, it was kind of like if we forget to study history, we repeat history. You've heard that old adage. I also think if we forget to look back at history, we look at our present and we live in more fear. And so I just hope that, if anything, the reminder of the fact that maybe these aren't the worst times ever is an encouragement to you to recognize what you can control and what you can't control about your life right now, and to not grow weary in doing good. I felt really encouraged by that. Looking around, what are the small and important things that you can do or be right where you are? And I think it kind of even goes back to the Lillian conversation I had last week. She just kept following God. God, what do you want me to do here and here and here, and how it integrated with other people using their gifts. So I'm going to pray over us. Lord, man, it's another season of, I think it's the enemy coming in and making us feel like you're off the throne, and that life feels real unstable sometimes when there's changes. And I pray, Lord, that we would find our firm foundation on you, God, that your Holy Spirit would be active and alive in our hearts and minds, so we would hear from you what is for us in this time. For that mom with the newborn, I pray you would encourage her heart right where she is, that although it may not be applauded today, that she is doing an important work. And for the woman who is caregiving for her parents or her spouse or a child, and it is daily, tedious work, but it is not small in your mind. Lord, I pray for her heart and soul. I pray over these elections, Lord. We know that you are sovereign and good, and that nothing is a surprise to you, and you haven't left your throne, and you are always, always working, that we can trust that. I pray that we can do the good where we are, that we can shine a light of your love and grace to the people around us and everyone we interact with kindness and goodness. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, y'all, for joining me. Next week, we're doing something a little different. My friend Courtney DeFeo of Pardon the Mess podcast is joining me here. We're talking about parenting boys versus parenting girls, and we know there's a wide spectrum even within those categories. But we're just going to have like an honest conversation. And then later in the week, we will move over to her show and continue the conversation into the differences in the dating realm and dances and all of that trickiness that so many people will message me and her on, like, how do you handle dating, or why aren't people dating? So why aren't teens dating? Anyway, tune in for that next week. Once again, always thank you for sharing with your friends any episode. You come up to me, you tell me you've been listening, and that is such an encouragement to me and to keep this show going. So appreciate you where you are doing what you can by sharing the show with your people. I'll see you here next week. Adios. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Don't Mom Alone podcast. If you're wanting to connect with more people and more resources to help remind you that you're not alone, head over to don'tmomalone.com. That's where you'll also find show notes with any links mentioned by our guests. Most importantly, I want you to know the good news, the great news that you're not alone because God has promised to always be with you. With faith in Jesus Christ, the one who died for you and rose again, Jesus said when he left, he was going to leave a helper, a comforter, to be with us. God in us. Moms, that's superpower. So while you're washing dishes at your kitchen sink, while you're driving to and from work, while you're feeding that baby late into the night, while you're cleaning sticky floors, God promises to be just as present with you as when you're worshiping in a church pew. As it says in Zephaniah 3:17, the Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He takes great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love, and he will rejoice over you with singing. Now that's good news. Have a great day.